let us settle into a gentle, steady rhythm and take a soft, slow walk through a familiar story made new by moonlight. Imagine, if you will, a small, warm room in the hush of the night. The lamp is low, and outside the world breathes quietly. On a comfortable chair, a storyteller leans forward, voice like warm honey, prepared to spin a tale that stretches long as a lazy river and gentle as a rocking boat. This is a tale of houses and gardens, of journeys and trickery, of stubborn hearts and unexpected kindness. It is a story to carry you softly toward sleep. Listen as if you were floating on a pillow of air, and let each image settle in like a feather, once not so very far from the edge of things you know. And in a time when towns smelled of fresh bread and the gardens were squares of loud green, there was a city called Padua. It lay in a gentle bowl of fields and lanes, warm with sunlight in the day and cool with evening shadow. Padua had stone streets where the cobblestones remembered the tread of many feet. It had trees that tossed their leaves like fans in a slow hand. And it had houses with small courtyards where vines braided themselves around lattices and hours stretched out like soft, comfortable blankets. In one such courtyard lived a man named Baptista Minola. He kept his house with a careful eye and a kindly, measured voice. He tended to his business and his neighbors, and his daughters were the quiet center of his days. 2 daughters made his house bright. The elder, Katharina, whose spark and sharpness could put a line through a lazy afternoon, and the younger, Bianca, who held her calm like a secret held close to the heart. Katharina and Bianca were different as day from dusk. Katharina walked like wind, brisk and direct, and when she spoke, her words came out as a startling wind chime that rang clear and true. People called her many things. Some called her a shrew because her words could bite, and because she would not be shaped into someone else's idea of polite softness. Yet beneath that fire was loyalty, and beneath that defense, a heart that had learned to guard itself. Bianca, on the other hand, was gentle and sweet, with a quiet curiosity that tended her like a garden tending a single, careful bloom. She loved music and books and the small pleasures of measured conversation. Baptista loved both his daughters in ways that were patient and plain. But he had a rule, decided by years of thinking and some practical caution. Bianca would not marry until Katharina was given a husband. It was a promise that shaped the days of all who lived in their neighborhood. Suitors arrived because word of Bianca's calm and grace traveled faster than a sparrow between eaves. Gentlemen bearing earnest bows and careful talk came from towns near and far, hoping to win a place beside such a quiet, witty woman. Lucentio was one such young man. He had traveled from Pisa, his eyes full of curiosity and a mind fertile with learning. He had come to Padua, seeking the kind of deep, steady studies that would fill his hours with meaning. But the city had its own magnetism. Lucentio's plans took a soft detour when he saw Bianca. She bent over a book like someone pouring seeds into soil. The sight of her turned his neat, scholarly maps of the future into a place where a new road might begin. He felt the first, unmistakable flutter that calls itself love, a gentle, urgent warmth that says, "I would know this heart." Lucentio had a loyal companion, Tranio, whose loyalty was as plain as a well-worn cloak. Tranio was practical and quick, the kind of friend who would move a small mountain to help his friends sleep easier at night. When Lucentio confessed the way his heart had shifted, Tranio met his warmth with a steady plan. They would not rush and break what might be tender. They would be clever, but in ways that spared hurt and kept kindness at the center. So they set small schemes in motion, not to wound or shame, but to settle their dreams into the world with careful hands. Nearby, a different kind of man prepared to travel to Padua, Petruchio from Verona. Petruchio was a man of confident gait and loud laughter. He had a boldness like a summer thunderstorm, brilliant, sharp, and impossible to ignore. He loved challenges, and the world loved to hear him speak. Word of Katharina's stubbornness reached him like a bell, and instead of shrinking, he leaned forward, interested. He did not see a brittle person to be broken. Rather, he felt curiosity, the kind that senses two strong wills might learn to fit around each other like two clever hands. Petruchio's heart was a fast, flying thing. He believed in living with exuberance, in bright gestures and loud promises. He thought it a fine thing to meet the world head-on. If Katharina was a storm, he wanted to stand in it and see what music it made. So he rode toward Padua with his man Grumio, who was a small island of calm mischief, always quick with a grin, even when events looked somber. Grumio moved in the world with a patient, knowing stride, used to carrying more than a pack, carrying small comforts of humor and cleverness to soften the edges of any day. The city, with its slow pace and bright market cries, set the stage for a delicate dance. People move, words exchange. Promises are set like small stones across a stream. The rules of the courtyard, of family and of custom, guided these people like a slow river guiding a skiff, always forward, not always straight, but steady enough. Petruchio arrived at Baptista's house with dramatic, curious gait. He was not concealed by timidity. Instead, he greeted the house with a voice that felt like summer lightning. He professed his intent in a clear, blunt way. Katharina would be his wife. Katharina, who was used to what she considered shrugs and flippant suitors, met him in the center of the courtyard with a sharp look. She was not one to move easily. She had learned caution. Here was a test. He was not a faint breeze. Their first moments together were like the first strike of a match, quick, bright, and scattering sparks. They traded smart words and jests, and sometimes the air seemed like a string ready to snap. Yet there was no edge of cruelty, rather, two strong people meeting and discovering how each would change the shape of the other. Petruchio spoke boldly of marrying Katharina, and she answered with a steel-edged humor. He laughed then, not to mock her, but because he admired that she stood so openly for herself. In quieter corners of the story, Lucentio and Tranio were careful as gardeners. They took gentle steps to learn Bianca's ways, to respect her sweetness and seek her consent. They arranged small, secret tasks so that affection would not be coerced or forced, but discovered and welcomed. Alongside them, Gremio and Hortensio, gentlemen who both hoped to win Bianca's hand, negotiated their rivalries with a notch of humor to prevent real harm. Hortensio, meanwhile, had thought once he might woo Bianca, but when he met Katharina's fire, he saw another path. He, like many who meet stubbornness, grew interested in how to shape his own heart to more honest, kinder love. Amid these tapestries of intent and longing, there drifted a trick of fate that felt like a soft breath. A traveling lord passing through found a sleeping tinker named Christopher Sly, and in a spirit of gentle mischief, decided to play a long, elaborate jest. Sly was wrapped in blankets and placed in a chamber of velvets and gentle music, so that when he woke, he might think himself a lord once more. This frame, a play within a play, cast a curious, thoughtful glow over the rest of the story, a reminder that identity and appearance can sometimes be a costume, and that truth at the center is a much gentler thing than any mask. Back in Baptista's courtyard, preparations were made with the warmth of gathering. Food was set, guests were invited, the day hummed like a distant choir. There is a particular hush before a wedding, a fragrant, heady pause, flowers waiting to be given, a table laid as if to honor the quiet unfolding of two lives. The heartbeats of the characters in this tale matched that hush. They moved by steps that were careful and bright. Petruchio was not a man who would stand by and let his plans drift like laundry on the line. He wanted to begin his life. He wanted Katharina. So he acted. With a brusque, dramatic tenderness, he wooed and he married her quickly. And then, with a tenderness as rough as an old pair of gloves, he began in his own peculiar way to try to meet her where she was. Some of his methods were puzzling, and he tested her in ways that made neighbors whisper. Yet every action was threaded with the desire for partnership. A desire that had the awkwardness of someone learning a new language overnight. Those early days of a shared home were a learning of seasons. Petruchio, in a kind of determined experiment, spoke of love in measures that tasted of command, yet hid patience. He watched Katharina like someone watching an ember, steady and intent. He would sometimes deny a comfort, not to wound, but as if to reveal how tender and necessary small comforts truly were. He patiently rearranged their lives, set gentle but firm boundaries, and slowly, like frost melting in the warm breath of spring, Katharina's edges softened, not melted into nothing, rather reshaped and steady, the way river stone becomes pleasantly smooth by slow and certain water. There were moments of misunderstanding. People laughed at the odd garments Petruchio wore. Grumio's humor kept the house alive through small foolishnesses. Boots that had seen better centuries, a hat patched in a dozen ways, and an armor of bright, loud language made to startle. These small absurdities became gentle tests, as if to find out which parts of Katharina were strong and which parts needed the slow wash of trust. Meanwhile, Lucentio's tenderness for Bianca grew with a soft brightness. Their courtship was like two birds learning the same song, careful at first, then gaining confidence. Tranio, always a loyal hand, lent his wit and willingness to create a space where their love could take root without hurt. He made small deceptions not as a thief does, but as someone building a garden fence to protect the tender shoots from being trampled by a thoughtless world. He dressed, he arranged. He spoke with the grave courtesy of someone who wanted nothing more than for the harvest to come true. Padua's social weave, its fathers, its merchants, its tutors and students, kept everything balanced with the softness of routine. They argued and laughed, bargained and blessed, their small dramas wrapped around each other like scarves in winter, each thread warm enough to comfort another. There were quarrels, but their edges were sanded by the commonplace sweetness of neighbors who, at the end of the day, drank tea together and shared the bread. Even the sharpest words in the story were braided with humor and the hope for gentleness. One gentle evening, some moments before evening softened into the hush of night, the household found itself pulled toward a quiet, decisive moment. Petruchio, having found his strange wisdom, called to Katharina and to the other women. It was a scene built not to shame, but to ask for a small, luminous gift, the gift of choosing the soft music of consent over the harsh rattle of argument. Katharina, who had once stood in the world as a bright, bristly hedge, stepped forward. She spoke with a voice now polished by the work of living with another. What she spoke was not surrender, but a meditation on the nature of partnership. She spoke of a husband as a companion, not a master. She spoke of love as a labor of attention, of patience, and of mutual care. She asked for a husband who would be a friend, not a ruler. Her voice, once bristly, had softened into something wiser. Petruchio listened, and the world around them listened. And where once there had been the roughness of clashing wills, there now spread a calm like settled water. In those final days, the house hummed with a steady peace. Lucentio and Bianca's gentle love breathed like a small candle. It lit the room without a loud flame. Hortensio found in another a different possibility, one quiet and measured. Even Grumio's small jokes seemed to carry the sweet patina of contentment. Humor had become a kind of tenderness. The Lord's jest with Christopher Sly, the sleeping tinker made to dream himself a lord, for an evening a prince, closed the book on the edges of the tale with a reminder. We wear many hats in our lives. Titles may shift, but what steadies a heart is kindness, trust, and the soft music of mutual respect. Padua, with its courtyards and gentle lanes, went on into the dawn. The marriages anchored new rhythms, mornings of small, companionable movements, afternoons of separate work and shared tables, evenings where two people might sit together under the same lamp and learn the small silences of each other. Katharina's laugh, once sharp as struck metal, came now like a bright bell rung with joy, and Petruchio, whose bravado had once been a gale, found contentment in the steady weather of a shared home. This tale, like all tender things, asks not to be pried open into pieces, but rather to be felt in the warmth left behind. There is softness here, in the way, too, people discover that arguing is less useful than listening, in the way love can be patient and slightly clumsy, and in the way true companionship grows quietly and insistently until it fills a room like late light. So as the night deepens and the lamp leans toward sleep, imagine the courtyard in Padua settling into a gentle hush. Hear the soft whisper of leaves. Picture windows closed against the cool, and a moon that pools like milk across the stones. Think of Baptista, with a small, contented smile, of Bianca, reading slowly by candlelight of Lucentio, folding thought into peace, and of Katharina and Petruchio, whose loud and bright meeting turned at last into laughter shared by two. Let this image rest upon your chest like a soft hand. Let each detail become a small, comforting weight, the slow click of a spindle, the hush of a turning page, the faint echo of footsteps in a stone lane, the hush of two voices agreeing on nothing and everything. Breathe in deeply. Notice how your shoulders loosen, how your breath deepens into soft, even waves. As you let your eyes grow heavy, imagine the gentle light of that Padua courtyard tracing the path to your dreams. If your mind wanders, bring it back gently to a single image, the lamplight on the courtyard, and two figures sitting close under a slow, patient sky. Drag your thoughts across that picture like a soft brush, smoothing the edges. Now let sleep come like a kind tide, patient and inevitable. Carry with you the warmth of gentleness and the quiet lesson that sometimes the strongest hearts become softer because, in the sharing, they discover how to be kinder. Good night. May your rest be cool and steady, full of gentle dreams and quiet mornings.